Welcome to yet another episode of The Speaking Citizen. I am Mehru Jafar. The Speaking Citizen is an ongoing series on art, culture, and literary activities. The Speaking Citizen introduces to you creative members of society like artists, writers, film and theater personalities, and sometimes poets. Today we have two guests who are talk of the country for giving viewers Class. Class is streaming at Netflix and has crawled up to rank the #1 show on television. It is one of the most watched show of this year, up to now. I have with me Ashim Ahluwalia, the creator of Class, along with his producer, Niharika Singh. Niharika is an Indian film actress and producer. I have been unable to verify, but do you, Niharika, play the role of Koel's mother in Class?
No, I don't. I actually got that a lot when we were shooting. A lot of crew members came and told me that, there's a huge resemblance, but no, I'm not playing any character in the show. I'm only producing the show with Ashim, and I was very happy to be behind the scenes through this process.
While you were auditioning the actor who plays Koel's mother, did you find any resemblance to yourself?
Honestly, at that time, not at all. But the way she performed the test, we really felt that she fit the role beautifully. She had that essence of Mrs. Kalra. So, what we had on paper, and when we saw the test, we just thought she was perfect for the part. So, that's all that mattered at that time.
Yeah. She was very, very good. So on Facebook, Niharika calls director Ashim Ahluwalia her decade-long partner in crime. The two have made the unforgettable Miss Lovely exactly 10 years ago. Now the two are back with Class. What attracted me to watch Class? It was much curiosity to find out what the young in the country are doing. What is on their mind? Where do they want to take the country in the future? There is, after all, so little literature, films, books on what the youth wants, what the youth is thinking. So I clicked play on Class, and the more I watched, the more like a dinosaur I felt. I wondered if I had spent my youth and my days in school and college, and now my old age on another planet. I had never in my life, believe me, met students like these, never seen a school like this, where the young are so vicious, so cruel, and so filthy rich. Do you think, Ashim, this world exists? How real is your story? Or is it total imagination?
I really wish it was total imagination. It would be a better world if it was. Unfortunately, it's absolutely real. I think if you just Google any of the school scandals that have happened in Delhi in the last 5 years, I think you'll see lots and lots of stories that are very reminiscent, and actually, frankly, that we've used a lot in Class. Whether it's the boys' locker room Instagram scandal, where students were talking about raping fellow students in a very wealthy school, or whether it's kids that have run over people in their Ferraris. It's all over the internet. So this is public domain news. What it isn't is what we don't see is when we make our youth shows, they're mostly either they're very middle class in terms of the milieu, or they are fantastical in terms of they're just sort of unreal. People live in homes that look like they're shot in chalets in Switzerland. And I just believe you don't need to go that far. You can just go to Gurgaon in Delhi or Chhatarpur Farms, and you can see something which is quite similar and very real. So I feel this is actually, unfortunately, very much a series of our time. And we did get a lot of research, a lot of young kids that we worked with who had come out of these schools sharing scandals, sharing WhatsApp messages and stories when we were writing this. So a lot of it is based in real life. Yeah.
But, I didn't have time when I got this assignment to talk to both of you to watch. I really wanted to watch Elite as well.
Yeah.
But I just had time to, watch the 8 episodes of The Class in one go. Does Elite also showcase a lifestyle like this, or you've adapted it to what you know about the way this section of society lives in India?
Niharika, you want to take this?
Well, see, the thing is, the show is about the elite. The original show, which was set in Spain, it's called Elite. It's about the elite in Spain. And what we've done is we've adapted it in the Indian context. But what I understand and what our research suggests is that the elite around the world have kind of similar lives, They kind of live in a bubble. We all know about the income inequality in the world. The rich are really, really rich. The poor are really, really poor. But the really, really rich around the world, the really, really elite in the world kind of have similar lives. They have, and their challenges are also similar. So I know this show might appear very, like unbelievable for some, especially for a lot of Indians who probably, like you, grew up in a more socialist era, of India, where probably we didn't have that much wealth. You probably grew up in an era which was the post-independence era, the post-independence socialist era.
More gentle, kind
Yes.
nation.
Yes, and more hopeful and all of that. But today, the generation today is not growing up in that era. This generation is growing up in a post-globalized, almost like capitalistic era. Here, when they have the kind of money that they have, the kind of money that the rich have, it is extreme. And especially in cities like Delhi, even Bombay. Obviously, the way rich function in Delhi and the way the rich function in Delhi, they're very different because they're living in very different cities and they have to kind of accommodate very different, like cityscapes. But the wealth in Delhi today, if you think about all this, read about all the stories and you read about the kind of schools there are, the kind of houses people live in, the kind of, advantages that they get because of, whether it's political connections or whether it's just like buying people out after, running over people or, like doing all sorts of crimes. I mean, these are real stories. This is the reality we are living in. So what we've tried to showcase is just our contemporary times, modern India, today's India. And just because we've not seen it represented on screen enough, it does not mean it does not exist. All we have to do is actually just like take a walk or, go to a party, to a party of young kids today, where everybody's like doing drugs and, coming in their flashy cars and, being as obnoxious as you thought these kids were in this show.
Just a comment about the original Spanish show. There is, of course, in Spain, the class difference is not that wide. We don't have the element of caste, which has been introduced in the show. And we also don't have the sort of, let's just say, high conflict religious moment that we're having in India. So there's a lot of, the boiling point in India is somewhere else, right? It's not, Spain feels very tame compared to where we're at in terms of all of these elements coming together. Being gay, being queer, trying to come out, all of these things are very high octane issues in India, right? So I think the show Class has a kind of intensity which the original does not have, and it also even though the plot might be kind of the same, the telling is completely different. So we are now in our show, we see the psychology of these characters, the kids themselves, and also the parents, which don't really make much of an appearance in the Spanish show at all. Here we really see rich Delhi parents and their lives as well. So I think that those are the differences, just even in terms of those two shows.
I have a question later on the similarities between the spirit of Southern European countries and India. You know, like years ago, there was a translation of Lorca's The House of Bernarda Alba, which was translated into Urdu as Begum Bilqis Ka Kunba. So maybe we'll come to that later. So having said what both of you have said, Niharika, what is it then? What is it, you know, from this maze of ideas that seem to have inspired you, what is it that attracted you to produce Class?
Well, I think for me, honestly, this was like the perfect setting and the perfect story, you know. Because I think other than the fact that I've had to deal with the elements that are in the show in my own personal life in various ways, you know, like I've had to deal with it myself. So I mean, I was born in Delhi. I was a teenager in Delhi. I was a rebellious teenager in Delhi, and
was your teenage life a little bit similar to some of these kids?
I won't say. See, I was a teenager. I'm 40 now, so I was a teenager in a different time. It was the early, you know. It was a very different time, but all teenagers kind of go through a similar angst, you know. I feel they have similar, they're exploring themselves, they're exploring their sexuality, they're trying to figure out who they really are. Everybody's like constantly, you know, getting drawn to each other, and, you know, the emotions are all very kind of, you know, up there, and you've not reached that place in your life when you know yourself, or you're settled in the way that you feel about yourself, or you feel about the world. So that kind of feeling, I think all teenagers have all over the world, wherever you are, no matter what class, caste, religion, where you belong, you know. So that, I think, is something what everybody is relating to when they're watching this show. As far as I'm concerned, yes, I think I had a little bit understanding of Delhi and the differences in Delhi that I kind of experienced as a teenager. And yes, because I think within my own family, I mean, if, you know, I've had people who are, you know, my own relatives who are living in villages, who are working class, and then, you know, people who are, you know, working in jobs, who are more middle class, and then some of them who are really like, you know, who've kind of become extremely wealthy, and then you kind of meet together and you see all the dynamics that sometimes play out. So I think, you know, some of us, like, and even for Ashim, for that matter, he'll speak to you about that. Like, some of us have had to deal with class within our own lives, within our own families, and I think that's how we have that understanding of it. And setting it in Delhi also, because obviously there's a bit of a connect there, so you understand the kind of landscape. So yeah. But for me, I think the show is really about like teenage angst and teenage exploration of your own self, you know. And I think that is kind of timeless and also not very, like, you know, regions centric.
No, it is very interesting to find out, you know, what the future citizens of the country are thinking, even though, you know, it might be a very small percentage that is represented in this show. But like I told you, I haven't watched the original Spanish Elite. But does the conflict in Elite revolve more around class, like the rich and the poor, since there is no caste problem in a country like Spain, which you have then transferred into a caste conflict? Is it something like that?
Here, you know, we have class and caste, and they're kind of interconnected. But I think what we also have is a much more brash society. I think in the Spanish, the rich kids are kind of mean, and you have some of those plot points, but they're not as entitled in a way, because I think one of the differences between Europe and India is the power that the rich hold, especially because you can essentially buy out the law. You know, you have the ability to bypass the law when you're really wealthy, and that gives you a certain entitlement in a school like this, because they know that daddy's protecting them, and daddy knows the minister, and daddy knows so-and-so, and you can get away with anything. So what that does is it heightens the stakes even within the class dynamic, independent of the caste element. even the class dynamics are very heightened in our show. With regards to the Spanish, you still can't, you know, I mean, in a way, there's a line beyond which you can't cross, whereas here, all lines can be crossed at all times. So I think that's definitely one part of it. Yeah, I mean, in terms of, I mean, of course, caste is another element in this dynamic, but I think it just makes it more complex. It just creates so many layers within layers that you have to kind of deal with. It's not simply rich and poor, you know.
Also, gender, I would say, you know, like how gender is dealt with in Europe and how, like, what's happening in India, you know, like, I think other than caste, I mean, we have to also look at how gender plays out in India, you know, and even religion. I mean, I would say, I mean, I know you said that we are representing a very small section of society in the show, but I beg to differ here because I feel we have tried to represent different kinds of people. You know, we have Saba, who's coming from a very conservative Muslim family. You know, that's kind of, that has left Kashmir. We have obviously these two brothers, you know, who come from a Bahujan community. We have, you know, these rich kids, but there's obviously a lot of like difference there too. Some like one family is old money, one is like nouveau rich, more nouveau rich family. One is like Dhruv's family is a middle class family. So I mean, yes, it is a school which is, you know, which only can the super rich afford. But we've tried to kind of create a world where there is, you know, like a range of people with different backgrounds and different, you know, worldviews. Yeah.
Yeah, I wish Saba did not represent only the conservative Muslim, because, you know, what about us? You know, we
I have a point to make on that. And it's very specific because I adapted these characters. So I was very careful about some of the stuff. And one of the very critical things that comes up, which might be overlooked, but actually I just did an interview right before this and they picked up on it, is that Yusuf Manzoor, Saba's dad, was a bit of a rock star when he was younger, right? And so actually they're not necessarily a conservative family, but there is this moment of identity. And I think conservative families sometimes have histories which may not be that conservative, and they may be forced into being conservative because they have to now sort of, in a way, they're forced into kind of an identity politics, whether they like it or not, right? So in this case, in the case of the Manzoor family, I'm very personally kind of, I would take all liability for that because I was very much adapting it and I was very careful because Kashmir is a hot topic. It's very easy to either become, you know, it can become sort of villainized or it can become the sort of innocent, you know, you can go either way with that. And I thought, what if you had Yusuf Manzoor, who himself was this cool dude when he was younger? He was not the conservative guy he's become now that he's in Delhi, now that things have gone down, that his brother was lynched for being gay. There's a lot of things that have happened in that family which are sort of alluded to. So I don't believe that the Manzoor family intrinsically is a conservative family. I think that
Saba is not conservative in her attitude towards life. You know, she might.
Nor is Farooq, nor is her brother Farooq.
Nor is Farooq, and nor is the mother.
Nor is the mother. The mother is just fantastic.
So, but your heart goes out to that family because they have been displaced and they seem lost in Delhi.
They seem lost.
Yes. So
and they all are clutching at straws in terms of where they want to be as an identity, right? Because the father has now taken on this role as the sort of kind of conservative patriarch, which he never was in his youth. Right? The kids are like not wanting to be part of this world. The mother is trying to keep it together and saying, take it easy, dad, like you're overdoing it. So there's this kind of power tussle even within the family of who they really are.
He's obsessed with the security of the family.
Exactly.
I think that is what matters to him.
Exactly.
But what was it for both of you? What was it that, you know, when you discovered Elite on screen, what was it that attracted you or made you take the trouble of adapting it into class?
Well, I think Ashim, he was the one who was offered this show. So I think he should answer that. I mean, obviously, I love the idea of it. And I wanted to definitely work on it with Ashim. But I think he should take that question because it was actually offered to him.
So I watched it, honestly, and I've always
Did you discover it by accident?
No.
I mean,
I never watched it. I'd never seen it. And I was not interested in making a series or anything. I was actually we were working on a film in Italy, actually, when the pandemic started. And at that moment, I was asked, would you be interested to look at this Spanish series Elite, which is very popular as an adaptation, as a young adult show? So we were offered it by a production company called Bodhi Tree, who very kindly thought of me and said, you have an interesting angle, take a look at it. Netflix was keen on it. Take a look at it. I looked at it and I said, okay, it's not really my thing. It's a very telenovela style, soap opera kind of thing. But while I watched it, and Niharika and I watched it together, I said to her, look, there's something really interesting about the dynamics of the writing. Even though the show style might be very different from what I've done, all these characters are very complex. The rich kids never play out. They never become typically rich kids. They suddenly get vulnerable. The poor kids don't become the innocents. They are also quite convoluted. Everybody has many shades. And I thought this could become really interesting in adaptation. So that's what actually drew me to it. And my first meeting, honestly, with Netflix was, I'm not a big fan of the way the show is made. It's not really what I want to do. If you guys are okay to let me do my thing and be free with a different vision for it, I would love to do it, but only if I have that freedom. And they did give me that support to let me do that. So I think that's where it came from. There was a lot of interesting material which felt relevant to India,
Has anybody said to you or to the media that class is better than elite?
Many people, and I'm very proud of that. But I don't want to compare, I feel honestly that's an unfair comparison simply because I think they had to stick their neck out first when they made it. It was made a long time ago, and they had to stick their neck out to make something which was as edgy at that time, which then had to be kind of masked in a telenovela kind of packaging to allow for those themes to be played out, right? So they did have to put their head on the chopping block first, bring that into public consumption, so that people could even process that kind of thing. And then I, of course, get the benefit, or we get the benefit, of course, of now doing it many years later when there's a lot more conversation around these things. And now we can say, hey, we want to do it like very realistic. We don't need to do the soap opera style approach. We can just get fully intense with this thing and do it, the way it should be done. But if we were doing it first, I'm not sure that anybody would even air this. So I have to give them the credit.
A lot of nuance, I found Sohani so nuanced, the way she relates to her family. And she is not at all willing to play the victim. And this is a very strong point in her character, although the media has picked out 4 other actors, as the most popular and upcoming. But I think Sohani is brilliant, and so is Neeru,
I agree.
Yeah, fantastic. So coming back to this, I think we've had enough of Spanish society, but since I wrote this question down, maybe we take it forward. There is a lot of commonality between the way of life here in India and in Southern European societies like Spain. So there are, we've in the past identified with films like The Big Fat Greek Wedding and Lorca's House of Bernarda Alba. I was wondering if these similarities in the view of the world in Southern European societies and India is what made you feel at home about taking up a Spanish story and presenting it in the Indian context.
I could take a little bit of that. I think, obviously Southern Europe is closer to India in the sense that, you've got all the typical things like the family structure, sense of community, all of those sort of hallmarks of the kind of, let's say, Southern society, right, essentially. And that comes from, and then also, of course, not the kind of Northern European wealth. So there's also shared resources. I think as societies get richer, communities break down because they don't need each other anymore, right? So Southern societies are slightly poorer. They need community, they need family to group together. So there's this certain kind of substructure, but I don't want to overstate it because I've spent time in Spain. Niharika and I've spent time in Spain, and I don't feel, I mean, if I look at it, I still feel like it's a very wealthy country in relation to India in terms of, yes, they have a sense of family, they sense the class system, but nothing, not a patch on how extreme it is here, in a sense, right? So yes, there is a point of connection from a storytelling point of view. And when we talk about Lorca, we're talking about many years ago. Now we talk about Lorca, we're talking about Spain, say in the 30s or 40s or 50s. Then it's probably a lot closer to the way we are now, right? Spain of the 20s is very interesting because, of course, you have you have Buñuel and you have lots of stuff that I relate to. But that's a Spain which was quite poor, much poorer than it is now. And that is much closer to, or Italy of the 20s or 30s or 40s is much closer to the India of today, I feel. So, on one hand, yes, there are similarities, but on the other hand, I think Europe is still very wealthy. And I think we have we have a lot of work to do with, at least with regards to equality. We're not close.
Or the crime situation and, Godfather like Italy, it's so, maybe it's similar to our underbelly in Mumbai or whatever. But Ashim, a few years ago, I want to remind you, you said you don't need actors like Shah Rukh Khan to make your film a success. But, and you've proved it also that you don't need SRK. But after Pathan, are you not tempted even a little to work with Shah Rukh?
No.
No?
Even less tempted than I'll tell you why. It's not that I have anything against a specific actor. I don't really care either way. I feel like, actors exist in a separate orbit from filmmakers, right? And for me, there's only one captain of a ship in the cinema I love, and that's the filmmaker. As a captain, I'm not saying the only person who makes it. Many people have to come together, as Niharika often reminds me. We all have to make films together, but there's a filmmaker's film, and then there's an actor's film. And those two films to me are never the same, right? Because when it's an actor's film, it's really about building that actor as a brand, as an image, as a mythology. And then the filmmaker is just at service of that mythology. And I don't want to be really the manager of an actor's mythology. That's not the job I want to do. There are many people who would love to do that because they themselves ascribe to that actor's mythology. For example, I know many directors who would love to work with Amitabh Bachchan because that's the mythology that they are completely indebted to. They've grown up with him. They're like, just the fact that he's on my set, I'm so proud of that and I'm so happy. And that's their, I don't come from that school. I come from school where the cinema is first and the actor is second. The actor is just one element in the film. They are not the reason for the film. So that's really where I'm coming from with regards to this. It's not a personal thing about any one particular actor personally.
Fair enough. That sounds completely understandable. But what do you think, both of you? In one sentence or two sentences, what do you think is responsible for the runaway success of Class?
I don't know. That Niharika can tell you. I'm completely confused and baffled by it. I did not expect it.
Yes, we are all baffled by it. We really we weren't expecting actually for it to become so popular. And, when we started getting the statistics and we were like, okay, this is kind of, on the top spot in countries like Oman, in Mauritius, in Maldives, people are watching it in Brazil. I mean, it's been on the top spot in more than 15 countries, and we're quite bewildered, honestly, because, anyway, Indian content doesn't travel so much globally where it, touches the top spot on OTT platforms. But we knew we were making something well. We obviously spent a lot of time.
Sounds so much like Pathan.
Yeah, we weren't expecting it. It's happening, and actually it's not even been promoted that much, I feel, where people should Pathan was promoted extensively. Everybody knew Pathan was coming out. When Class came out, I don't think more than a few people came to know about it, but the word is spread and all kinds of people are watching it, and the kind of feedback we're getting, we are just completely bewildered because I mean, Ashim's daughter's teacher just wrote us an email and asked us to come and do a class in school, you know, on the basis of this show. We've had like, you know, like people in their 60s and 70s loving it. And, you know, we've had like middle class, like housewives loving it. And that was so shocking. It's like, nobody's finding this bizarre, and they like kind of, you know, aren't they feeling what the hell is going on and what are we showing? Nothing. We're really surprised, honestly speaking. Nobody expected it to be so popular. But I think one reason why I think it might be doing well is because it really is about India today, you know. It really is about contemporary times. It is about, we all know people like that. Somewhere,
the very, very brilliant acting. I mean, I am so happy for both of you. Like the young kids. I mean, they've acted so well, so intense. And, I mean, a joy to watch these youngsters and to look forward to seeing what they will do next. So I would like, we've come to the end of our talk, unfortunately. Congratulations, both of you, for having orchestrated so well such an amazing constellation of actors, fresh faces, and we look forward to Class Season 2, because it seems you're working on that. Thank you so much, both of you, for talking to The Citizen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.